Hi, it's Bobby from Fifth Avenue Cakes. Welcome back. I thought that today's tutorial should be on some fun shaded brush embroidery. It's a little bit different than the other brush embroidery techniques that I've shown you in the fact that the entire flower in this case is all brush embroidery. It's got a two-tone effect. And then I went ahead and did some pretty overpiping scrolls and just some designs on the side. So let me show you how I did all this. On my last tutorial that I did, I showed an image. I actually did an image, and somebody asked me if I would show how you transfer an image. So this is the image that is for the cookie, and Sydney made this for me, and I'm going to show you how I transfer them to a cake or a cookie. In this case, I want it to be on the, I'm going to put the cookie on an angle. I just like the way it looks. And then I'm going to center it however I want it to go. And then I have these little precision pins. They're very small. I know that it's going to be covered, so I'm just going to stick it right there. And then what I like to do is take my stylus or dotting tool to my brush embroidery brush on the other end. And then what I'll do is just go over the image. Sometimes I will just do it freehand, and sometimes I will bring the image in. You can turn it the other way. This is just plain tracing paper. So if you wanted to, you can turn it so the graphite is down on the cookie. Graphite is not poisonous. It's okay for you to have in little quantities. I don't think I'd run around eating a ton of graphite. But sometimes I find, especially depending on the fondant that I'm using, I'll get these smudge marks, and they're almost impossible to get rid of. So unless you know that your cookie is completely dry and that you have a very, very steady hand and you're not going to poke through in any way, this way works a little bit better. And then you don't have to worry about it. Now I only put one pin in, and then I use my hands to hold down the rest of the image. And I know I'm kind of in front of the image, but literally all I'm doing is tracing the design. And actually the inside of this design, I'm not even going to see once I start brush embroidering. I'll put the picture in front of me at that point. I'm just going to lift up and make sure that I've got a nice... Oh, I lost my pin. And if you find, like right there, I didn't have an impression. And you could also use this tool if you decided to turn it the other way. And there you go. You've got a nice impression that no one will see once you're finished brush embroidering. Alright, so what you need next is you need a brush embroidery brush. It can either be square or round, whichever one you like. A little cup of cool boiled water that I put in the refrigerator, where I like the colder the better. And then I've got my parchment paper cornets, and I have them labeled with the sizes that they are, because sometimes it gets a little bit confusing. They're so close. So we're going to start with the outside color, which is this light violet. And I am using a sugar flare color. And just like regular brush embroidery, you're going to work in small sections. And it doesn't matter if you do a zigzag, if you do straight, if you have a little air bubble, because you're pretty much going to be pulling it down. I'm putting in my second color. I'm working with an off-peak consistency, and since I just did a tutorial on consistencies, if you need to, go back and refresh yourself. I dipped my brush embroidery brush in the water, used my fingers to wring out the excess water. You don't want it to be too wet, and you definitely don't want it to be too dry. What I like best about brush embroidery is it's extremely forgiving. So if you find that you don't like what you did, it's pretty easy to fix it. So that was petal number 1. And you're going to go around the entire flower doing the exact same thing. And depending on, how comfortable you feel and how fast you are, you could probably do 2 petals at a time. For this tutorial, I'm just going to do 1 at a time. And I'm working with 2 different size tips. The cookies that you saw actually had a number 3 tip PME and a number 2 PME. I didn't like how bulky the outside looks, so I went down to a 2.5. So now we're working with a 2 and a 2.5. But Sydney liked the 3 just fine. So it really is a personal preference of how much of that light you want to have showing. And the light here in my kitchen's a little bit off. It's a little bit difficult to see. But if you know just a petal shape, you can follow your design, change it up, you can freehand it. You don't have to use that exact design or technique. I just had somebody ask me if I would please show how I transfer a design onto a cake or a cookie, so I thought this would be a good time to do that. So now we have the outside of our cookie, and I am wiping my brush just on a clean, damp paper towel. So we're going to go into the inside and do just about the same thing. Most of the people I teach this technique to like brush embroidery. They find it fun, it's easy, it doesn't take a lot of concentration. It's something that just about anybody can do once they get a handle on the consistency of the royal icing. I'm turning the cookie so that I can get a better angle. I'm going to go ahead and do 2 sides because I'm working pretty fast here. When it comes to the green stem, which I'm going to do, and the little hip that I have at the bottom, there are a couple different ways you can do it. You can brush embroidery it, or you can just pipe it in. I'm going to go ahead and brush embroidery it in. I like to go ahead and dip my brush in the water each time and use my hands like this to wring it out. But if you find an easier way, by all means use it. We're not doing a tone and tone with this, so I'm just going to bring this little side in. And I'm more V'd than I want to, but that's alright. And then I'm going to do the exact same technique and shade it on in. And then pull this down. And maybe pull this up into the flower a little bit. There we go. I got that one just a little bit too wet, so I'm going to show you what you do to fix that. And I'm just pulling it up into that area of my flower right there. And at this point, I'm just going to move the icing so that I've got a nice little hip. And then I'll go ahead and bring down my center. I mean my stem, not my center. And connect it on in. I want to bring this part of the stem into the hip, and then I'll start brushing at the same angle on both sides. So you want to come down. And you can add like a little angle up here. I did that with some of them, so it looks like it's coming out from the ground. And that's it for the brush embroidery. Now let's go ahead and do some over piping. Now it looks like a little bit of water on my cookie, so let me get that off. So for the over piping, we're going to start with a number 3. I have an ivory colored royal icing at soft peak consistency, and I'm just going to come in and do my little scrolls. And the reason that I wanted to make sure that I had these scrolls in, and obviously you don't have to draw them in if you don't want to, is I wanted them to be even on both sides. When you're doing your scrolls, you want to keep your tip up and then release pressure and come down. So you want to let gravity help you out here. Make your little shape, your S shape, kind of an S or a C. And then you can use a little brush if you get it too high and pat it down. Now we're going to get it to a number 2, labeled number 2. Same consistency, smaller tip, and do the exact same thing. You want to come right over the top and bring it down, releasing pressure as you get to the bottom. Now, depending on how fast you are, you might want to let the bottom dry for a minute or two, or it might have already crusted over. Oh, that was a big one. Did you guys hear it? Normally it doesn't rain like this, but it has been lately. That's the other thing. If it's really humid where you are, you definitely will want to wait before you go and do your overpiping, or you'll find that it won't handle the weight of the overpiping and it will start slipping down. Now, in a cookie, that's probably not as likely as it would be in a cake, because the cookie's flat and the cake, you'd have your gravity pulling on it. But so that I wanted to teach you the correct way. I'm just making sure that my tips are hitting my PME sponge in there on my holder. And all I'm doing is taking my brush and moving this over. I noticed that it slipped, and it's probably because I did not let it dry long enough. As you go down in your tip size, you'll notice it gets a little bit more difficult to keep a nice, even straight line. That just is practice. And this is my number 1. We're doing the exact same thing. And as I get towards the bottom, I will release my pressure and bring that line down. And use my damp brush just ever so slightly to give it a nice look. And you just want to keep following the scroll that you made. Stretching out that line so you get a nice curve. I thought I'm on the wrong side. That definitely would give me a problem. I'm using my finger just to steady my tip. I'm keeping my finger over the tip when I go to fix, if I need to fix a line. You want to make sure that your tip is clean at all times, and if you think you're going to have a problem, pipe it on your work surface so that you don't do what I just did. The more you allow gravity to help you stretch out that icing, the prettier your scroll will be. And so will be your overpiping. And I'm just going to put this one back into place. Seems to be my problem child. And then the next thing that I did and this is completely up to you. I just made some little dots. If they peak on you, because I'm not working with a bead consistency, I'm just working with my soft peak consistency, use your brush. To take the peak away. And the exact same thing up here. I'm just cleaning it up a little bit. A little something right there that I don't want. There we go. And these are just decorative. No, I put that in the wrong place. So we'll just pick it up. If it wasn't over there. Just some decorative dot beads or dots, whatever you want to call them, just to add a little bit of interest to your piping. I colored them with an old gold and some Everclear. You could use lemon extract if you wanted. Somebody asked me if I had tried gold piping gel. I have not, but if you have and it's worked well for you, then that would work as well. You just have to make a new bag. And then up on the top, I just did just a little bit of decorative pressure piping. And you've seen me do this so many times before on borders. You're just making a bead and pulling it out. When that dries, I will go ahead and paint those. So that's it. Oh, I didn't show you this one part. I wanted that to dry. So for my center, I'm going to kind of copy the design I already have up here. So I'm just going to put a bead, pulling it down. And since this is a little bit stiffer of a consistency, it's going to give a little bit more texture. And that's it. That's all you do. That's shade brush embroidery with a little bit of over piping. I hope you've had fun. See you next time.